What's up, everybody? Coming to you on a beautiful day outside. We're going to tell you a little story about my second car. And contrary to the shirt, I was not always a Chevy fan. I was actually just a fan of whatever the hell I could get. So today, I'm going to tell you the story about my second car, which was a Ford Escort. Stay tuned. All right. So, little story today on driving through life. I wanted to do a little series about some of the cars that I've had and really how I felt how they represented basically kind of where I was at in my life. I already covered this boss story about the 91 Chevy Corsica. Now, after the Corsica finally met its demise at a junkyard, I needed a new car. I wanted something that was obviously a little bit faster. I wanted a manual, really bad. Corsica was only an automatic. So next thing I went out and did is the same mistake that a lot of young people make, and that's get a loan. And so I went to a place that shall not be named, lowbooksales.com. Yeah. And I went ahead and got a loan, and I got totally screwed on this loan, right? It was like 45% interest rate or whatever. It was ridiculous. Paid way too much for the car. But I bought an '01 Ford Escort ZX2. This thing was awesome at the time. I was like 18 years old, right? It's my first car loan, first newer car that I had ever had. It was what, 2004, something like that. It was a 5-speed manual. It was a 2-liter Z-Tech, which was kind of the Ford ripoff of the V-Tech. So it had that variable valve timing, but kind of, you know, the Ford version of it. And so I remember getting this car and being so excited. I'm driving a manual. I'm cruising, the whopping 130 horsepower that it had at the time, and front wheel drive and everything. But I was cruising up the canyon to my house in Park City at the time, and I was like, wow, this car really pulls, because I'd never really driven anything faster than that. And so for the next couple years, I was totally Ford. I was Ford Escort all the way, and I was pumped to have a car that had its grassroots in the European rally scene, and I was looking at all these different parts online. Not many people made stuff for it, surprisingly enough. They made some like Altezza taillights. They made some exhausts for it, but again, I didn't like exhaust, so I just chopped that off, but that sounded significantly different than a 3.1 V6. That was the definition of a racer.
Smells like fucking shit.
Is how that sounded. And so my first manual car, I was slamming into third. We would be on State Street, the main drag here, every night with hundreds of other cars, going out to California Avenue and doing stupid stuff, right? So I'd be racing it every single weekend and then commuting at work. And it was a crazy time. I loved the car. I put an intake on it. I put some, I put a hood scoop on it with that red mesh stuff that you get at AutoZone. Again, I was AutoZone's #1 customer back there. Everything I got was from AutoZone, even the hacksaw that I used to cut off the exhaust. I didn't do anything too crazy to it. I did blow up the transmission and took it to the first shop that I was actually sponsored by here in Salt Lake, and had them rebuild the entire transmission on an '01 Ford Escort. Yeah, really just blowing money out my ass at that point, right? The guys looked at me, they're used to working on, 5.0 Fox body Mustangs. They're used to working on Silverados that run, 13 flats, etc. And I bring them this little red Ford Escort. They're like, you really want us to rebuild the transmission in this? I'm like, yep. And they pulled the gears out, and there's metal shavings everywhere, and third gear was like a solid ring. There's nothing left of it. I mean, it was a really fun car. Got into a lot of trouble in that car. At one point, I intended on turboing it because I didn't know anything about compression ratios. I just thought maybe I could throw a turbo on it and call it good. Now, at the time, here was the catch. At the time, I actually lived in a condo, and there was 3 guys total that lived there and 2 cats. That's a story for later. We all lived in this condo and we all liked fast cars. So needless to say, the spots in front of our condo were filled with oil all the time. And it was an elderly condo neighborhood. So, you know, we were the loud, annoying kids working on their cars till 3 o'clock in the morning in no parking stalls, right? Just little parking spots right in front of our door. And, you know, that's how we did all of our mods back then. You know, we raced when we could. We modded when we could. We spent our money on cigarettes, beer, food, sometimes rent, and of course car parts whenever we could. I bought a CT26 turbo from a kid that had an MR2, and I had full intentions on putting this tiny little turbo, and I look back on it, these things are tiny little turbos. I had the full intention of just throwing this in a Ford Escort and, you know, popping 9s at the dragway on my front wheel drive car. But needless to say, that never happened because I kept blowing it up. It was a fun car, threw fog lights on it. Again, AutoZone special. There's a theme here. It was an interesting time in my life at that point too, because I was out of high school. I was doing construction, getting whatever jobs I could. I actually started my first sales job when I had that car, which was a really important turning point because at that point I had only done lifting jobs, right? I'd done stage crew for years. I had done, you know, technical theater. I had done grunt jobs. I had done, I was a bouncer at a club for a little while. I was a construction worker. Sales was actually, once I got into sales, I started realizing that it was really my true calling because I could bullshit and act like I know what I was talking about. So all the money I made in sales, door-to-door sales, right? All the money I made from that, I dumped into this Ford Escort, and I was broke all the frickin' time. But yeah, I tell you what, when Friday night came along at about 8, 9 o'clock, we were ready to go. We'd start up the cars, fueled up, take out our back seats for maximum weight efficiency, and we would hit State Street and go do stupid shit.
What the hell's going on around here?
Street's closed, pizza boy. Find another way home.
Goddamn street racers.
Well, obviously, since I was spending all my money on car parts and a car payment every once in a while, I was getting a little bit behind on that. I was just young and stupid, right? Just ruining my credit. I didn't pay for insurance on the car because I was still new and stupid. So I was coming back from a job interview somewhere up in Park City. And in fact, it was the job interview that I ended up getting into sales for. And a highway patrolman pulls me over and he's like, do you have insurance on this car? I was like,
No, 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 hell no.
No. I was behind like 2 car payments as it was, right? I was just a broke, stupid kid. I wasn't even speeding. That was the first time I wasn't speeding in that car. Pulls me over, gun, you know, hand on his hip, stuff like that, all serious. And I didn't have insurance, so they ended up arresting me, right? And since no one else was in the car, they impounded the car. And they called like 5 highway patrolmen. And it was just me, just little old me, and this little Ford Escort, this little high school girl car, right? And they called in like 5 highway patrolmen, and all these cars are lined up at the summit, and people driving by, honking and stuff like that. I'm like, shit, this is really, really bad. I was really trying to make a fresh start here, and I get arrested. So I'm in, funny story, I am in the passenger side seat of the highway patrol car, handcuffed like this. And they start going through my trunk. That was a bad idea. It was old school, right? So I had a baseball bat in my trunk. I had a couple of knives because I really liked knives back then. I had a frickin' machete because we used to go camping every once in a while. So I had this long ass machete. I have that machete somewhere. I'm gonna have to find that and show it to you. Yeah, So I had this long ass machete in the trunk and just random shit and like knives and stuff like that. And so you got 5 highway patrolmen just going through my trunk and looking at shit and pulling out knives. And what is the one thing that he had a question about? It was this, my shift knob. Let me get a little closer to you. Get closer to the camera. This was my shift knob in the Ford Escort. Now, some of you have seen this before. There's a little button on the side, a little skull, the eyes light up when it has batteries in it. It's your shift knob. It just, you know, goes right on top of your shifter, right? But I was dumb and I was brand new to mechanicking and I didn't know how to install a new shifter. And this one kept popping off. This is the exact one, by the way. This is the last thing I have of that Escort. I've kept this thing forever. I love it. It's a great paperweight. But I didn't know how to install it. So what did I use? Super glue, of course. You know, something doesn't stick, you put super glue on it. So the bottom of this, there was like a little layer of residue, super glue. And it had popped off and I said, screw it. And I just threw it in the passenger seat like a week or two before. And I was using my stock shifter. So homeboy, after pulling machetes and knives and bats out of the trunk of my car, and there's like 5 highway patrolmen behind me and shit like that, and looking into the car, staring at me and talking to each other while pulling all this stuff out of my trunk. This dude comes back into the car, reads me my rights off of the Miranda card, reads me my rights, and says, okay, I'm gonna ask you a question about what we found in your trunk. I'm like, okay. He's like, what is this? And he holds this thing up. I'm like, that's a shift knob. He said, well, there's residue in here. It looks like some sort of residue, like a drug contraband. Bro, that's super glue. I was too poor to get the right adapter, so I used super glue. That's what you're looking at. And that was it. And not a happy ending there. Went off to jail and got picked up by my buddy in his Eclipse. More to come on that later. And spent the night in jail / sliding off the side of the road in my buddy's Eclipse because he was trying to cheer me up and pull a Tokyo drift around a corner in a front wheel drive car. Yeah, it was a Fox, sure. And we ended up in a ditch. So it was a very, very long day. That car was really interesting because it was my first step into adulthood and priorities and managing money, getting screwed by loans. And I learned a lot of lessons. I didn't learn them at the time, right? Because I ended up buying another car before I got rid of that one. But I learned a lot of lessons. And it was a cool car. It holds a special place in my heart. I ran that thing into the ground and ended up getting it repoed because I couldn't pay my bills. But I was young and stupid. And that's the path. You know, at the time, my only focus was racing. My only focus was spending all the money I had to feed the old need for speed addiction. But I tell you what, that Ford Escort on State Street Saturday night, you could hear that thing for miles. And it was a beastly 130 horsepower. There it is. My second car, Ford Escort ZX2. Thanks for watching, guys. Like and subscribe if you like the content. It'd mean a lot to me. I'm kicking out videos as much as I can, learning editing and while balancing trying to get all this business paperwork done and taken care of. So an update coming soon on that. You know what? Go out there. Don't be a dick. Make good choices, do what makes you happy, and above all, keep on driving. Thanks, guys. P.S. I found the machete. Ooh, look at that duct tape handle and everything. This thing's a classic. Watch this.